Alright, this is your 9-1 notes. A lot of this you can get your points from the calculator. So the first thing I'm going to do on number 1 is I'm going to type that into into y equals. So I have 3x squared. When I go to my table, the first point that I'm able to plot is negative 212. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to zoom this in. I'm going to go ahead and plot negative 212. Next point I can plot is negative 1, 3, so negative 1, positive 3. Then I have 0, 0, 1, 3, and then 2, positive 12. Okay, so you're going to connect your dots. And we're going to go ahead and answer the questions below. First one says your domain. Your domain, that is all of your x values. So if you notice, we have two arrows that shows it's going to keep going on and on and on in both directions, off to the left, off to the right. So your domain here is all real numbers, which is that fancy, funny looking R. Or you can see it as from negative infinity, less than x, less than positive infinity. Okay, range, that is your y values. So looking here at my picture, I'm starting down here at 0, and you go all the way up, and you keep going up and up and up and up and up. So what I'm going to put here for my range is that y is going to be greater than or equal to 0, because that's where I started on my y-axis. Right, your axis of symmetry, all that is, it's right here at where it cuts your graph right into half. So it cuts my graph at x equals 0. Your vertex, that is your bottom point right here. Okay, so that's kind of like the bottom of the hill. My vertex here is at 0, 0. And looking at that vertex, you decide if it's a max or if it's a min. Well, if you put your two hands together to kind of make a U shape, if your wrist right there meet at the bottom, it's a minimum. Okay, if you were to put your hands together to make like an upside down U shape where your fingers touch, that's your maximum. So in this case, it's kind of like a U, and since you have a U, you're going to have a minimum. So I'm just going to write down MIN. So it's a minimum because it goes like this. So that vertex right there, that point, that's a minimum. Y-intercept, that's what crosses the y-axis. So when I look here at my y-axis, I cross right there at 0, 0 again. Alright, number 2, so we have y equals negative 1/2 x squared, so negative 1/2 x squared. We'll look at my table. The first point that I can do is a negative 2, so I have negative 2, let's see, we'll get a different color, get orange, okay. Negative 2, negative 2, so negative 2, negative 2. I'm going to zoom this in some. Alright, next one that I have is a negative 1 and a negative half. Then we have 0, 0. Then I have 1 negative half. Then we have 2 negative 2. 3 negative 4.5. That's off the graph. So here's where I can connect my dots. And I'm going to go ahead and answer the question. So the first one asks for the domain. Those are your x values. So if you notice, your x values keep going on, 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 on. Your arrow points all the way to the left, arrow points all the way to the right. So this is again going to be all real numbers, or from negative infinity, less than x, less than positive infinity. Range, those are your y values. So looking at my range, I'm starting here and I go down all the way and keep going, keep going. So my range is actually going to be less than or equal to where I started, which is at 0. Axis of symmetry is right here where you cut your graph in half. Okay, it's going to be the same x value as your vertex, and so that is going to be at x equals 0. Oops, x equals 0. Erase that piece. My vertex, okay, so your vertex is right here. It's either the highest or the lowest point. That's at 0, 0. Okay, if I were looking at this as if this was, a little mountain or something, a hill, and I'm walking along, walking along, walking along, walking along, this is the top, the highest point, so we're going to call this the maximum. So that's your max. And your y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis, so again, that's at 0, 0. All right, number 3. So number 3, we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug this in. If I can zoom in, so I have y equals negative x squared plus 2x plus 1. We'll look at my table, and so we're going to go ahead and start at negative 1. Negative 1 is at negative 2. So negative 1, negative 2. 0 is at positive 1. 1 is, hang on, let's pause this real quick. Plotted the point 0, 1, so I'm going to keep on going. I'm going to plot 1, 2, and then I have the point 2, 1, and then I have the point 3, negative 2, and then the next one is 4, negative 7, and that's off the chart, so I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots. Alright, and let me go ahead now and answer the question. So domain, again, your arrows tell you that it's going to keep on going to the left and keep on going to the right. So my range is going to be all real numbers. And negative infinity is less than x less than positive infinity. That's an infinity symbol. My range, so if you look, I'm starting up here and I keep going all the way down. So my y values are less than or equal to that number that I started with at the top. And that right there is at 2. Your axis of symmetry is what cuts your graph in half. So it cuts it in half right there at x equals 1. That will help you identify your vertex. So my vertex is up here at 1, 2. And since I said up there, as in it's the very top, that's going to be your maximum. And your y-intercept is where it crosses the y-axis. So when I look at my y-axis, I'm crossing right here at 1. So this is going to be 0, 1. Alright, number 4. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this into y equals. It is 2x squared minus 16x plus 33. I got my table. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can start at negative 1, which I can't. I can't start at 0. I can't start at 1. I can start at 2, though. So I have 2, 9. So there is 2, 9. Then I can do 3, 3, so 3, 3. Then I can do 4, 1, so 4, 1. Then I can do 5, 3, so 5, 3. And I can do 6, 9 because the next one is off the chart. So here is my graph. Alright, let me go ahead and answer my questions now. First one is my domain. So again, your graph keeps going, going, going a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. So that's going to cover all my x values. So that's all real numbers, or you can write as a negative infinity, less than x, less than positive infinity. My range, those are my y values. I'm starting down here and I go up, 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 up. So my y values are going to be greater than or equal to that number, which I'm starting at 1. Axis of symmetry is the line that cuts your graph right into half, making it symmetrical, hence the word axis of symmetry. And that's going to be right there at x is equal to 4. Your vertex, it's either the top, top, top point or bottom, bottom, bottom point. And here, this is my bottom point, and that point is at 4, 1. Since I said bottom, okay, it's at the very, very bottom, which is going to be my minimum. And my y-intercept is not on my graph, but if you go to your table and look at where x is 0, it is at 0, 33. Alright, and now we got one more page. So here we go, number 5. We have y equals x squared minus 8x plus 13. I'm going to look at my table. And the first point that I can graph, it looks like I can graph 1, 6. So let me zoom in. Nope, I can't even graph 1, 6. I can graph 2, 1. I can graph 3, negative 2. I can graph 4, negative 3. I can graph 5, negative 2. And I can graph 6, 1. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots. Almost. And we're going to go ahead and answer the questions below. So again, domain, that is your x values. Okay, so your x values, again, they're all real numbers because it's going all the way out to negative infinity and it's going all the way out to positive infinity on my x values. Next thing is my range. Okay, range is where you start on the y values, and in this case, I'm going up. So where I started is at negative 3. So since I'm going up, that means it's going to be all my y values are either greater than or equal to that negative 3. Axis of symmetry is where I'm going to cut this graph right in half. Cut the graph right in half here at x is equal to 4. Then I have my vertex. That's either the highest or lowest point on the graph. Here it's the lowest point, and that is at 4, negative 3. Since it is the lowest point, that is called your minimum. If it was the highest point, that is your maximum. The y-intercept is not on this graph, but if I go to my table and look at when x is 0, my y value is 13. Okay, and again, you can always pause and rewind this stuff if it goes too fast for you. Number 6 in y equals negative x squared minus 8x minus 13. Put that in y equals. Go to your table. See, the first thing I can plot is, I can't plot 7, negative 6. I can't plot, yes I can. I have 6, negative 1. So negative 6, negative 1, there's my first point. Negative 5, positive 2 is my next. Negative 4, positive 3 is the next one. Negative 3, positive 2. Negative 2, negative 1. Negative 1, negative 6 is off the graph, so I can't plot that. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots, and I'm going to answer the question. So first is domain. Domain are your x values. Okay, so again, since I have the arrows, it's going to be my all real numbers. So that means that this arrow keeps going into the negative infinities, and the other arrow on the right keeps going, and that's going to hit all the way out to the positive infinity. My range are my y values. It's where I start and keep going. In this case, since I'm going down, all those y values are less than where I'm starting, and I'm starting at 3. So y is, I got my wrong color. Y is going to be less than or equal to that 3. Axis of symmetry is where I cut this graph right in half, and I'm cutting this graph right in half at negative 4, so x is equal to negative 4. Your vertex is either the highest or the lowest point. Here I have this high point at negative 4, 3. Since I said it is the highest point, that's going to be a maximum because you cannot go any further up. Your y-intercept is not on the graph, but if you look in your calculator, it is at 0, negative 13. Alright, we got 2 more left. Number 7, same thing. Y equals, we have x minus 3 squared plus 1. Gonna look at my table. I cannot do any of these, not 0. I can do 1 though. So let's start with 1. So I have 1, positive 5, and I'm going to zoom in on this. Alright, so we have 1, positive 5. So there's my first point. We have 2, 2. So there's 2, 2. I have 3, 1. So there's 3, 1. 4, 2, 4, 2, and 5, 5. So 5, 5. Let me go ahead and connect these dots. And then we're going to answer the same question. So first one is your range. Your domain. And domain is about all your x values. So looking at this, those arrows tell me they keep going in both directions. So I can do either all real numbers, or you can write it as negative infinities less than x less than positive infinity. My range starts from my lowest y value all the way up. So since I'm going up, those y values are going to be greater than or equal to where I started, which is at 1. Okay, so I'm looking over here. Axis of symmetry is where I cut my graph right in half. I cut my graph right in half here at x is equal to 3. My vertex, that is either the highest or lowest point. Here it's the lowest point at 3, negative 1. Max or minimum, so since I said lowest point, this here is going to be a minimum. And my y-intercept is not on the graph, but if I look in my calculator, it is at 0, 10. Because your x value is always 0 for your y-intercept. Alright, and the last one we have is y is equal to 1/2 parentheses x minus 4 squared minus 2. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and look at my table, and I can't do 0, 6. I can graph 1, 2.5. So we're going to have some decimals on this one. X is 1, 2.5, so that's in between 2 and 3. When x is 2, y is 0. When x is 3, y is negative 1.5. When x is 4, it's negative 2. When x is 5, it's negative 1.5. When x is 6, it's 0. And when x is 7, it's 2.5. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots and draw my arrows. And we're going to answer the question. So again, domain, since those arrows, one goes off to the left and one goes off to the right, we know this is going to be all real numbers, which means you are including every single number from that positive infinity to negative infinity. Range, okay, so that's where I'm starting on my y's, and here I'm going all the way up. Since I'm going up, that means my y's are going to be greater than or equal to negative 2. Axis of symmetry is where you cut your graph in half. So I'm cutting my graph in half here at x equals 4. Vertex is either the highest or lowest point, so here it's the lowest point, and that point's at 4, negative 2. Since I said it's at the lowest point, this means that it's going to be a minimum because you cannot go any lower. And your y-intercept, my y-intercept is not on this graph. You can look at your table, and the y-intercept here would be at, my table says it's at 0, 6. All right, and yeah, that is it. So those are your 9-1 notes.